Chapter 2. The water was black, thick globules clinging to swirling masses of this substance were ever more present the further I went. Though the overall contamination level of this place is relatively low, that doesn't mean that a miniature interlocutor cannot begin a small colony here. In tiny patches, no more than a few feet across at most, hair-like strands stretched out from grassy pods. Dotted within the patches were more of those boils. They emit a dim light, one which reacted to the proteins in the water, enabling a sort of bioluminescent phosphorus effect. I could see quite clearly, even when the overhead lamps were out. Everything underneath the water was illuminated by a dull green color, with splatters of red and black inkish clouds that gently molded to my movements. What I witnessed in the station was an absolute nightmare, one which haunted me. Her eyes still consume my mind, causing my thoughts to ruminate. Over and over, I played back the scene, analyzing every moment where I could have done something different. The fear I felt was unlike any I had suffered before, paralyzing, yet intoxicating. Even with all this, I still felt a sense of calm amidst the storm. My pace was slow and steady. My eyes were fixated on the ground, and my mind was completely at ease. More troublesome was the environment, as it felt like the tunnels themselves weren't consistent. Some tunnels would be marked appropriately, with basic signs stating which tunnel is which. I was in tunnel C12, which loops into the overhead tunnel A3. A3 wraps over to the D network, where the base was located. I would enter a tunnel that clearly stated A3, then I would find an intersection that stated B8 and D5, despite me not being anywhere near those networks. I would keep walking until I found A3 again. The overhead network, A, is easily identifiable, as the tunnels are wider and the tracks are bigger. I eventually found yet another A3 tunnel, and only then did I think about which tunnel network I had actually been traveling through. I turned around to find complete and utter darkness. Pitch black. No noise. No nothing. The water seemed to stagnate nearby. It occurred to me that I wasn't following the tracks either. Under my feet was simply stone, and all around me was more of it. There was a gargantuan hole that led to an even larger tunnel. That tunnel was the one marked A3. Believe me, I wanted to leave. I wanted to simply go through the hole and be on my way. But I couldn't. There was a presence in the cave alongside me. No panic overwhelmed me this time, despite something shifting in the dark. More strands of the substance waved towards me, as if something approached, then turned around just before the light. I can't use this plasma cutter underwater. Defenseless, I stood there, waiting for something. The sounds of water lapping just above me, a terrible ink moving towards me, and a current beginning to form. Along with the current, a moan of incredible depth erupted from the darkness. And now, in view, was the beginning of a maw I had never dreamt to see. One large pillar of crushed enamel speared the darkness, yet the enamel looked off. When I say crushed, I mean compressed, as if hundreds of teeth were pressurized into this one mass. The pillar moved forward, revealing the lower mandible of something. Slowly, I backed away towards the hole, ensuring my feet kicked up no sand and made very little impact on the surrounding waters. Step by step, I moved out of the way. From the side, I could see tendrils gripping the teeth towards the base. They flexed as my gaze passed over them. The teeth fell to the floor and scraped along the stones. The creature moaned as it passed through, tearing apart anything on the seafloor with its horrific tusks. When the teeth weren't in view, a horrid mass of congealed and blackened tendons revealed itself. A quick flex, and the flesh opened to reveal an eye, cloudy but taller than me. The whole creature took up the entirety of the cavern, so I backed right into tunnel A3. When my feet touched the ground, I snapped to attention. All panic now consumed me. My thoughts ran away from logic, and my sense of reality began to stagger. In no documentation, no report, no briefing, was there any hint of this creature's existence, making me assume that most don't get out of the cavern. This thing must be a predator, one of the many we've been warned about. This planet hosts a variety of hostile life. How I survived this, I will never know. Suddenly, as quickly as the panic came, it left, replacing the sensation with euphoric lethargy. My joy at being alive was counteracted by the terrible feeling of waking from a dream. Perhaps I was unconscious, in a fugue state throughout my travels. Looking down tunnel A3, I could see C12 in a suspiciously massive hole just before the turn. My mistake? Though now, was I not only in a post-trance drowsiness, I had no idea how long I was in that state for. Despite this, I trudged on. I don't know how long I walked for, but I eventually made it to a crossroads of sorts. Terrifying as it was, I could get my bearing. The contamination of this sector is incredibly high. Caution is king under here, apparently. The passageway leading into this crossroads was black, swarming with tendrils and twitching ulcers filled with green liquid. Chapter 3. The crossroads directed me towards the nearby and dry tunnel D4. There's a maintenance shaft that runs through the walls. It can get me around the collapse that blocks it off. I have to hope that the maintenance tunnel shaft is intact as well. D4 isn't a transit line. It's an automated porter network of drones that would deliver supplies to various outposts. Delta was the first of these lines that was constructed strictly for the science division, meaning that if this ooze was a subject broken free, samples of it could be throughout the tunnel. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be too far off from the truth. Looking down the narrow shaft that will bring me to D4 fills me with trepidation unlike any other. Those invisible millipedes with syringes for legs that crawl carelessly and viciously through your spine, wrapping and weaving around your ribcage, tickling the muscles, encouraging you to move, to twitch, to flail, to scream. One light emits a powerful beam, illuminating a mass that clings to the shaft walls and flattens itself upon its cold caress. That mass moves. It undulates and grips the metal with incredible strength. There seems to be a protrusion that resists just on the pinnacle of it, but I can't make it out from here. The shaft also wasn't in view. I would need to approach and investigate it with this thing sitting right there. There's gotta be another way. Looking at the map in the crossroads reveals that the beta line does connect to Delta, 26 miles from here. Half of that is retreading this ground. If I go through the maintenance shaft and get to that dry line, it would take me only another 4 to get to where I need to go. If I were to take the beta access, then it would be going through 6 miles of the alpha line as well. Worse yet, the only exterior shaft nearby is connected directly to that very maintenance shaft. Just wonderful. Being on the surface means being subject to this planet's nighttime predators. Scant few have been recorded, and those that have painted a bleak picture before. I peered down the Delta tunnel again, and this time the mass was moving off the wall and directly towards me. I shot from my position at the map and immediately began searching for a hiding spot. The best I could do was to find a small outcrop left from falling rocks in the roof. I pinned myself to the stones with my legs and held myself aloft with my arms. If I was spotted, there wouldn't be any escape to attempt to make. The thing was closing in now, speeding up it seemed. I could hear the sounds of breaking and crunching underneath gooey and squishy paste. With a deep and aggressive groan coming from the creature, bouncing off the walls and directly through me. The way it moaned felt targeted, not as a result of locomotion. It must have been targeted. No creature can make that sound naturally. There's no way. High notes seemingly shot directly through my body like bullets, igniting my muscles to move once the pitch was reached. All blanketed in dysmorphic, low-toned moaning. As it sounded, I clamored and stumbled in place, attempting to keep myself from spasming off the wall. I could genuinely feel the noise as it bounced off the wall and through my back. Soon, it was in the room. In a heartbeat, it pushed a globule of its body through an opening and seemingly inflated instantly, carrying with it the audible sound of crunching and squashing. Whatever made up the solid mass of that being somehow clicks back into place after breaking. Rapid regeneration is impossible. We've yet to observe it in any life form. With the noise came its visage, a melted droplet of pitch black ink congealed into one writhing body. Its skeleton stuck out in spear-like points. They directed themselves towards any noise that occurs, no matter how minor. This caused an oddly mesmerizing effect, with the spears moving in rhythmic waves. Highly sensitive to all audio, it's strangely hypnotizing, and I myself was caught in its effects. Thankfully, nothing came of it. No voice shot from the creature to stun me, so I merely remained in place. Swiftly it moved through the crossroads, blanketing many things, including the map, in black ink that made it impossible to identify. It fled down the beta line, likely headed for Alpha or the C line. Without wasting a breath, I descended from my hiding spot and quickly booked it for the D4 tunnel. As I ran, my mind swarmed with thoughts so powerful they could blind me. And quickly, they did. Soon, I could barely run at all. And all sound came through a filter that broke it down to its bare vibrations. My eyes saw everything in the dark, including those that possibly lurk there. I was somewhere else, but I could recognize the light blue bulbs that decorate the maintenance shaft. I ducked in, sliding through the entry on my side. When I stopped, I could see perfectly down the tunnel. The lights were out, and the access shaft was completely fine. The green light of the airlock tempted me. Just above me, however, was a ladder, leading to the outside. Unfortunately, the only barrier between me and the airlock was the nest of ventilation that was now in a terrific clamor over my intrusion. My heart pounded in my chest, my eyes twitched and skittered in dire accordance to the screeching horrors that infested this place. They tried to remain fixated on the green light at the end of the tunnel. I moved. Only one arm had sensation in it, so I pulled myself forward with that. The other remained limp, and I dragged it without a second thought. The metal grating beneath me could reveal the creatures that scream, but I kept my gaze on that light. Inch by inch, I skid across the entire shaft to reach the other side. It was a person-sized funnel that went directly into the airlock. I attempted to stand in this funnel, but my legs had little to no sensation either. With one arm, I pulled myself to that door, lifted myself, and pulled the lever to enable the airlock. As it flooded, a strangely distant human scream could be heard, and I jolted in place as I thought I saw a person's face in the window. I shot back in complete fear. All sensation had returned, all noise had silenced, and the airlock door opened with a glimmering, soft light emitting from within. I remained still, listening intently to my surroundings. Not a single sound, no skittering, no screaming, just the natural ambience of water. I entered and enabled the pumps. A quick scan suggested I be in depressurization for 16 hours.
Depressurization suggested for a minimum of 16 hours.
Even directed me to a medical facility nearby. I scanned its interior, found no living inhabitants, only hostile inhabitants, and decided to pressurize the entire D4 tunnel to my body's specific requirements. As this was happening, I fought for the ability to stay awake. Despite being startled, it felt more like my heart was bleeding and deflating. My lungs felt weak, and my legs struggled to hold me upright. As the water drained, this was exacerbated, as this planet has quite the gravitational field. It yanked me down, and I couldn't fight the will to fall. I was on my knees, tears streamed from my eyes, and I collapsed to the floor asleep. The timer was set to 15 hours, 55 minutes, and 12 seconds. Delta Line, Chapter 4. I awoke to the terrible sound of a buzzer, muffled by ringing and squealing. A steel-plated bench had automatically pulled out just above me. The dimmed green lights grew bright white, and the door hissed as it slipped into the floor. I rose to my feet, slightly wobbly, but nothing extreme. I hobbled to the terminal, which did me the gracious favor of scanning me and sending it to a nearby data center. I couldn't make sense of all the results. A couple areas were red, namely my throat, chest, and my head. Fractures in my ankle. Low circulation in one arm because of the trauma, and the other because I slept on it. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun day. I exited the airlock. Thankfully, the pressurization was spot on, and I wasn't in any degree of physical discomfort. The lights were fairly bright from the inside. They seemed much dimmer now. In its darkest corners, I could see the growths of the black ichor, reeling and writhing in strange motions. An unfortunate byproduct of my recent encounter is a strange shaking. In no way can I be still. My eyes still analyze everything 100 times a second just to ensure that it's real. At the very least, I'm in the Delta Line. A nearby map console ensured me that I was, in fact, in the Delta Line. Less than 4 miles left till I can get to a functional station. Problem is that 2 miles of it are apparently locked down. While there is a perfectly serviceable maintenance shaft, the time on this face of the planet is 22:43. I contemplated my next move as I walked along the drone tracks, still somehow operational. Massive canisters filled with any number of ingredients were being held aloft by large hook and claw, which directed it along the track. All along the way, scans were being performed to ensure the package's safety. Who it was being delivered to, I'm hoping to find out. Despite the working lights and operating drones bringing some measure of security to me, I still felt terrible, like I was going to vomit at any moment. My body languished, heavy arms and steel legs, all the while my lungs were sporadically breathing, suffocating sometimes, and other times hyperventilating. My mind was awash in the watercolor blur of thoughts and emotions, as well as the creeping exhaustion that's been looming since I woke up. Of course, this all was only happening because of the disparity that had set in. You can't see it from the airlock, but it turns out that the entire tunnel is collapsed, with only half a mile to work with. Still, the maintenance shaft was fine. In fact, it was eerily close to the collapse. I felt the odd desire to run back to the map and check. So I did. And yes, it indeed claimed that the collapse was 2 miles away, and that the deliveries were proceeding as normal using the exterior track. Drones feel no fear, so we figured they could survive just fine on the surface. Well, there's a reason it's not the default. The drones may feel no fear, but they can do little to survive in the face of the larger predators. The exterior track, in fact, emits a whirring sound, one which attracts the creatures, though that only remains a theory. Still, I went to the collapse and found it once again. Maintenance shaft and everything still there. I chose to cave in and just go through the shaft. Might as well. Anything to get me out of here. I walked over to the red-lit ladder and began to ascend, counting my steps as if they were my last. 38, in case you were curious. When I got to the latch, something stopped. My heart dropped and my ears began to ring once more. This time, extremely loud. I felt as though something was off. My eyes twitched back and forth, once again in accordance with a strange sound. A lower frequency, one that pounded on the eardrums directly, quivering your body, forfeiting your thoughts while ignoring your actions. Though all remained quiet, all remained still, all remained calm. This sound was becoming more and more palpable, alongside a slightly higher frequency, still lower in tone. There was something else in those noises too. A strange, yet pronounced, increase in the audio, almost like a roar. A sudden rise in intensity, then it drifts back to normal. When it's normal, it's ringing. The roar began again, but this time faster, like a laugh. It had a certain number of rises, each one breaking my eardrum further. I never quite considered that collapse. I merely caught a cursory glance at it twice. Come to think of it, not a single one of those canisters fell off the line. It was just rubble. And as this thought came to my head, the frequency giggled once more. This sent a balloon of paranoia into my chest, instantly inflating with the acidic anxiety that I had grown so used to down here. My hands clutched the latch's handle for dear life. I couldn't look down. Instead, I glared into the barrier between me and yet another evil. If I go back, there's something else down here. Tears began to well in my eyes as my arms shook violently. I couldn't help but whimper as I turned that valve. In an instant, I was flooded with dense, powerful water. I only then realized that I hadn't pressurized the shaft. I was taking on the entire weight of the ocean on top of the weight of this gravity. I collided with the ground, turning everything black, as the frequencies giggle erupted from the door that was now at my side. That giggle remained until I faded. Didn't take too long to awaken. I figured myself for dead, and it certainly felt that way when I had opened my eyes. The glass on my helmet was cracked. Somehow, it hadn't collapsed. My arms and legs cracked and popped as I rose to my feet. With all the elegance of a drunken sailor, I threw myself up and up that ladder. The whole while, all audio was being attuned to broken melodies and horrid frequencies. The pitches shifted, the volume stuttered. My skull racketed back and forth as I ascended. My neck was limp. My chest was barely fluttering light breaths, and I was quickly blinded by sheer blue lights. Not the kind that indicate hostility. Rather, it was the blue glow of the ocean above. When my feet hit the sand, it was surreal. I could see for miles, and I could even see the delta base I'd been hunting for. Directly ahead of me was a plateau, on which all of our bases were built. These plateaus all have separate trenches between them, each going so deep we stopped searching for a bottom. Off to my left was the outstretched hand of the abyss, the gargantuan hole that we have been studying, though I am not presently near any. There are a number of steel ropes holding the alpha base aloft in the center of the chasm, and you can theoretically climb them all the way down to the base itself. However, the abyss harbors some of the more vicious creatures, all of them large and very powerful. The largest we have recorded, titled L1/D2, or Mama, lurks in that abyss. We've seen its back. It is the seafloor down there, and every now and then it moves. When it does, an uncountable amount of terrors and horrors fling from the abyss into the open waters. When it is there, you can look down into the enormous hole with some measure of security. If you spot hundreds of thousands of glowing blue dots, then Mama is home. When she's not, there is nothing, absolutely nothing down there. Hell, you can't even tell where the alpha base is without some lights. We haven't found a bottom to that hole, but then again, we haven't been able to explore it. Off to my right is a strong fear object, a massive collection of downed spacecraft. Hundreds, thousands, possibly more. Anything that tries to investigate this place gets killed before any information can be received. Fun fact, this place has only 4 known creatures that inhabit it. Yet, those 4 only account strictly for 3 instances. Mama has never attacked anyone, never shown any aggression or interaction in general. This means that out of the hundreds of instances of aggression, only 3 creatures have ever been recorded to do it. All of them massive. All of them in the graveyard to my left. My fear object comes from ships and starcraft being underwater. Any moving metal object makes my skin crawl and my muscles twitch when it's beneath the waves. I only know of 1 creature in there. The only one they felt like telling me about. Armadon, a large serpentine creature with 2 articulate arms at the front. It latches onto the ships and propels itself off them with remarkable understanding of its mass, showing little fear and less remorse. Supposedly, it was discovered when a starship carrying a vessel built specifically to survive the crash and operate underwater was downed. The small sub that survived managed to remove itself from the starship, and its video logs were being relayed directly through the station Lamia Prime back to Sun's Prometheus. Whatever it showed was a nightmare unlike any other, and it was being streamed publicly to millions of outposts, aside from Prometheus, all showing the failure that was Project Derelict. This is where we got our first glimpse of the seabed in full detail, and where we first got to see the graveyard. After fumbling the sub for 40 minutes, trying not to slam into all the metal spears around the place, the sub eventually began to rise above the graveyard. They landed smack dab in the crater, and they couldn't believe their eyes. No matter where they looked, even with the best visibility, they couldn't find the end to the graveyard. Just more and more ships piled on one another, each crushed underneath the sea's tremendous weight. A very clear roar was heard over the stream, even jamming the audio feed a bit with its intensity. And within 5 seconds flat, a creature rose from a wreck directly in front of them. 2 articulated arms, 2 heads with 2 eyes each, a gaping maw at the bottom, and many tendrils that extruded from its base. It emerged, leapt for the sub. Then the feed was dark. That's the Armadon. The fact that the station is within sight is still a monumental leap for me, and I was quickly closing in on its location. Unfortunately, one of the trenches lay just outside the base's borders. I could see the bubbles rising from some rooms. I saw functional equipment and surveillance all over. I could even see disdams, large mechanized exosuits that protect you from the crushing depth and can perform a variety of industrial tasks even underneath the ocean. There were people there. Just before me, however, was the tremendous abyss. The bridge was out, and it looked like it had been abandoned. Perhaps they have a reason for staying away from this plateau. None of the support beams rose high enough for me to leap off them. There was nothing connecting the 2 land masses. My best bet was to walk along the exterior drone tram, which was a foot-wide iron pole with intermittent drones that screech across and can electrocute you if you're too close to where it connects to the pole. Granted, I only see a drone every 5 minutes, maybe, but I'm not willing to take chances. The only other option would be to walk over to the graveyard. A large carrier vessel collapsed almost directly on the trench, leaving its wreckage as a bridge. It's not too far, but I can hear many things already moving around in there. Metal groans. Sometimes it crashes, roars, growls, clicks. A grandiose clamor unlike any you've experienced. My body ached, and walking any further than I need to is nothing that I can perceivably do. Lowering myself on one knee, I held my helmet and glared at the crack. That rampant discord of audio began once more, interpreting everything as disjointed voices and half-hearted drunken melodies. A tick began in my left ear and ringing in the right. My vision was gone, blurred out of existence from my constant attempts to fixate on the glass crack and my paranoia yanking my vision to and fro. Just when all seemed like it was going to fade again, a glimmer of hope appeared. A massive metal bulkhead thundered open. 3 people walked out in suits similar to mine. I had to notify them somehow, so I turned on my plasma cutter and began to trigger it above my head. Thankfully, they did notice, and we scrambled about trying to find a similar frequency. No luck. Looks like we were just going to have to do this without a single word spoken. Still, I could see their faces, the concern they had, and the defense one took. We eventually settled, after a while of gesturing back and forth with our hands, on the idea that I need to make the jump, and they'll try and catch me. They tried to assure me of something, but I wasn't clear on it. Still, I took the leap, giving my entire body to the ocean, hoping to God that it pities me this once. It did, somehow. When my feet left the sand, almost instantly a current lifted my body. It wasn't enough to clear the entire gap, but I was grabbed by the people waiting on the other side. A hand gripped mine with incredible strength, and I was lifted to my feet. As I rose, however, my heart sank once more. The lethargy had reappeared, and suddenly I was in a fugue state. When my vision passed the ledge, I realized that there was really only one person. It was a she, and she lifted me up, looked at my face with great concern, and mouthed very clearly the words, "Are you okay?" I collapsed once again. Though I was still conscious, I was frustrated, not knowing what's real and what isn't, and I guess I just gave up. She dragged me into the airlock, and with a powerful yet calm whir, I drifted into sleep.
What it do, son? You know, it's your boy, the Disciple, back again with some more dope shit, man. This one, we've been doing these since pretty much the start, the Derelict series. Still dope, getting doper, so sick, too ill, whatever else you fucking kids say, you know? We're just trying to keep up, alright? So, listen, love it, like it, all of it. Why don't you, if you can, you know, support dreams, okay? The writer, Malice, a partner to the channel who works with me to create content for you. Check him out. He's got a Patreon. You know, his work helps keep the channel going. When I'm producing, I can't write, okay? I can only do one thing at a time. Broseph, check him out. He does commissions, he does art, he'll do writing for you. What do you want? Hit him up, he'll do it. He'll probably even take some sexy pictures for you if you wanted. I don't know. You'd have to work that out with him. And obviously the sexier, the more he'd want. So it really just depends on your budget, you know? But hey, that's what we're here for. We're here